I was fortunate enough to grow up outside of Detroit, Michigan. I was fortunate enough to have like art programs throughout most of my schooling. And uh, I wasn't, I would say that I gravitated to art as an expression, mostly because I was an athlete when I was young, but it didn't really fulfill the need to express the way that art did. Uh, I wasn't really successful with math and reading. It took me a longer time than most kids to start to read, and I struggled so hard with math, and my teachers wanted me to get tested for learning disability in math, but my parents never allowed me to for some reason. But all my other classes, I did pretty well, especially when it came to art. I felt super successful in art as far as I felt supported by my teachers, even though I didn't feel taken seriously as an artist outside of maybe those teachers, not at home or anything, or my family system, felt seen in those art classes. And that's what really drove me to want to be an artist, and just the way that it felt to get the art out of me. I graduated from Michigan State with a education BFA in art and a major in education. And I moved out to the desert during the recession. Everyone was leaving Michigan. So when I came here, it was so different. But I guess I was just young enough and passionate enough to not really care. And it was also new. And I loved the desert. I loved the influence of Mexican culture. I loved the warmth and just the fact that it felt like a slower pace of living. And my studio was always within like a 10-minute walk of my house. So I've always considered myself an artist, and I've used it as an expression to get my feelings out. And it's just the way that my personality comes through and the way I show up in the world. My creative process has evolved quite a bit over the years. I I love painting. I feel like I always wanted to be a painter. I had a vision of myself being a painter from a young age before I even really knew what being an artist was. I just had a vision of me living in the desert and having a paintbrush in my hand. But I did definitely go through stages where I did more multimedia work and video art and collage. And then it wasn't until maybe like 2019 that I started to really start to take my painting like as the focus and to really to do a deep dive into my painting. Well, a lot of my work has to do with being a woman and the struggles of being a woman and just being seen and heard and taken seriously in this world. And I was really upset, like, that women weren't taken seriously growing up. I felt like one of the boys. Like I just felt powerful, but I just experienced that feeling of diminishment and objectification, like many women have experienced, being treated as if you're an object or just some kind of a trophy or something. I'm a painter and I want to be an artist and I want to be a painter. And I felt like that was just like the echo of my young adulthood is just like, I want to be a painter. I can do this too. Like, pay attention to me. Look at me. Like, I I can be taken seriously. So in college, I thankfully I was like exposed to feminism, and I really got into it. It's a way that I dealt with a lot of these struggles, like reading feminist thinkers and studying feminist artists. And Jean Kilbourne was heavily influential to a lot of the ideas that developed came out of my work. I was inspired by the way that she was a documentarian, and or she is an author, and she spoke a lot about media representation of women and how that can be like dangerous to women, and how objectifying a human being can create violence towards them. Bell Hooks was definitely my favorite feminist thinker and visionary. I just love the way she allowed herself to be so vulnerable through her work, and how she talks about transformation and love. And I think that there's just something about talking about things that are very difficult to bring out of the dark and into the light. When something is not talked about, these feelings we have inside, like for me, I hid that I had an eating disorder for so long until my my teeth were messed up. I think I was 24, And I had to tell my mom that I had all these cavities, but it became this big, it felt shameful to me and it felt like something I wasn't allowed to talk about. And I think as artists, we're extra sensitive, and it became my way of just controlling the feelings that were felt really uncontrollable inside. So the painting behind me, um, actually, I should say that I used art and feminism to process these feelings. I did eventually get into therapy and did a lot of years of therapy, and that really helped. It's still something that I struggle with at times, and it's something that's like kind of like this monster. I talk like there's a lot of like monsters in my art, and just like I feel like it's kind of this thing inside of me that I'm always trying to like get better at and like learn from and just be myself and not worry about all the pressures of being a woman in the society. But it comes out. I think my intention is that people could be able to talk about things that feel scary in order and like be more vulnerable in order to um, bring these things out of the dark, and like just like so people know they're not alone. I think that's a lot of the issues in our world, is that people feel alone and they feel isolated, especially with the way that our technology has been moving on in the world. And it's really easy to get lost in our cell phones and not connect with each other. So I connect to myself through my art. But to get back on track, I started, I think maybe my late 20s or early 30s, I don't know, maybe like 12 years ago or so. I started altering fashion magazines, and I wanted to like express this dark side of beauty and how it's it's grotesque. And I was drawn to like more grotesque art back then. Like I still love and appreciate these artists, but I really loved like Jenny Savelle and Egon Schiele and Francis Bacon. And now I'm not so much drawn to their work as much nowadays, but there was this like darkness expression getting out that I for some reason connected to. And I think now in my work you can still see that darkness, but I like to make more light of it and to kind of make the use of humor, which was heavily influenced by the Guerrilla Girls, who I adore. And I was so excited. I got involved with the Women's Caucus of Art about 12 years ago. It's like how I ended up being able to have my art seen on a level that where I felt it was being taken more seriously. And I got to show my art with a bunch of women who we all took each other seriously. And Guerrilla Girls, they talk a lot about the underrepresentation of women and like museums and stuff. And a lot of my work, especially in the Altered History series, is talking about the underrepresentation of women throughout art history, and how I just really want that to change. And it's not fair. And like women should be seen, and museums should reflect the society that we're living in. And for some reason, I got this idea into my head when I was a student that art was like the heartbeat of culture and the zeitgeist of culture, and that art is a reflection of um, the stories of our lives. And I just really, I think I still believe and just like have hope that we could change the way this world operates if somehow our art changed. um, or exactly who is shown as being serious artists. I've always wanted to somehow transform ideas and bring attention and inspire some kind of change through my art. It's been really important on my process. Yeah. Getting back into therapy was transformational for me. And again, like studying bell hooks and feminism was really paramount on that path. But it was in therapy. Have a really great therapist, but that I was able to start validating myself and like taking myself seriously. And as I began taking myself more seriously, I kind of saw that reflected back in the world. So I've just been on this mission to just keep showing up for my art and putting it out there seriously. And one of the most exciting projects that I have been involved in is that over the past year and a half or two, um, I met Sloan Bouchier from Art Musia Foundation and had this amazing opportunity where he saw my work and what I was doing and connected with it, and like invited me to have an exhibition before their bigger museum was even built. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I was freaking out about it for so long. But then finally we got in touch, and they ended up hiring me to do a mural and an installation in the museum Labyrinth, which was such a huge opportunity for me. And I ended up doing another mural in Tucson after that. But my altered history piece, the series that I shared with Arts Foundation, that series I would say is, I mean, all my work is really meaningful, but the meaning behind that work, I think when people understand it, it makes it click more. But the Rubens piece is an abduction and a rape scene. And I put clothing on the women because throughout art history, women are usually, and in museums, women are usually perceived as sexual objects of desire, like nudes, and not as the creator, the artist, the visionary. So I wanted to flip that role. So I gave the women clothing in my painting style, and I gave them lightning bolts coming out of their hands. And this was before power, by the way. But the lightning bolt was coming out of their hands, and you could see targets on the men's face, and there's knives coming from the sky, like towards the men. So it's basically like helping them to fight back from the rapist. And I use knives as a motif a lot in my work. I think of them as just like a way to use art to fight back against things that I don't agree with. And a lot of people, a lot of women don't, a lot of men don't. And I also think of them as protection. Like you might see like a leg with knives coming out of it. And that piece is called Women's Issues. And it's about protecting women's rights and reproductive freedom and fighting back against a system that oppresses women for power and greed and financial monetary reasons that I don't agree with. And that's why I have a lot of like I use a lot of circulars. I get inspiration in collage. Used to collage a lot of images from circulars that you get in your mail every week. I have a ton of them. But you'll see a lot of those slogans from the circulars, like great deals, fresh, never frozen. All that comes out of my lexicon of talking about how advertising creates this place of submission for women in our reinforces it in our society, and how I want that to change. Next year, I'm going to take some time to focus more on my art and less on teaching, and it feels good to finally be at that place and to just know that if you just like, just to know that you keep doing it, like even if you think, it's just for you or it is just for you, like your art's there for a reason, and it is an expression of your spirit, and the world needs your art. And if you have something to say through your art, that's amazing too. And I always think that's like the most inspiring art for me anyhow.